Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. How many of you have been to one of our events before? Awesome. Lots of returning people. Thank you and welcome back. So welcome to Products That Count. For those of you, if it's your first time here, just wanted to talk a little bit about it. So we are about 17,000 people strong. We're a community of product managers, innovators, etc., spread out in San Francisco, London, and now New York City. We put up this wonderful speaker series on a monthly basis. We also have some rich content, so if you haven't signed up for our newsletter yet, please do. We also have regular podcasts. And again, just like this, all these events that are just networking opportunities for your fellow product people. And then we also put together some executive retreats from time to time. Before I introduce our speaker, I just want to thank DigitalOcean for once again hosting us, this wonderful space, the lovely food. Thank you so much. And invite Shivan to say a few words about DigitalOcean.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Everybody's so quiet and like focused. Come on, you're a small, intimate group. All right, well, I don't have a lot to say other than welcome to our space. We host a lot of our developer events here, and we're very happy to partner with Products That Count and to host this event here. It's a great product event once a month. I'm a big fan of it, but also we get really, really good speakers, so you guys are in for a treat today. Brent has some really amazing insights to share, lots to learn. And I love what Products That Count are doing also from the perspective of creating a community of product managers, product innovators that come together and build a community on the East Coast and in New York. Very quick what we do, very simple. We are a cloud platform for developers. We really focus on making it very easy for developers to get going on our platform. So our philosophy is that developing cloud applications can be complicated, and there are so many tools that you have to pick from. And so all we do is we focus on the user experience and the developer experience to make it very easy for you to build applications. And to that end, we are also hiring. So we're hiring product managers and product designers. So if any of you are interested in any opportunities, I'll be available later back there to have a chat. But other than that, enjoy this event. And I hope you come back because we have a very, very impressive speaker lineup. One that even I sort of like, I better arrange my travel around this because they have a really good speaker lineup. So enjoy the day and hope you come back and spread the word. And let's develop a community that we're proud of in New York. Thank you.
All right, so our speaker tonight, I'm very excited to introduce him. He is the EVP of product at the XO Group, so responsible for the knot, the bump, the nest. And he's also worked at companies like Chegg, Udacity, Mint, as well as ClassPass. So I'm very excited to introduce Brent tonight, who's going to be speaking about user science. So let's all clap our hands for him. Welcome, Brent.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. I'm just going to put a timer on here because I can talk about user science all day and all night. I know you guys have places to get back to. It's a pleasure to chat with you about user science today. As Andrea mentioned, I'm at XO Group, which is especially known for the knot. I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Rob Facino, who's a founder of the XO Group in the knot in the back. So I have to thank you for my job. Thanks, guys, for putting this on, Products That Count. Thanks, DigitalOcean, for hosting. DigitalOcean is one of the fastest growing product orgs in New York. It's absolutely amazing what they're building here. Fortunately, they're not competitive with the knot there for developers. We're for people getting married. Very different things. Today, I'm going to talk to you about user science. To start with, let's understand our audience. How many here of you guys are in product management? So 2/3. How about product design? Most of the rest. And engineering? So a couple. We're mostly product managers and product designers. I run product design and user research at XO Group. We are downtown at 195 Broadway. We have about a 300-person engineering and product design org. The product and design org itself is about 50. So we're one of the larger product orgs in New York. And we have a lot of stuff to build because planning a wedding is really freaking hard. We're going to talk about user science. I just want to start with, how did we come up with this thing, user science? I'm lucky. I've had the ability to get training from product folks from different DNA strands. When I first started in product, I was at a startup called Mint. Have any of you guys heard of Mint? Mint was founded, a great founder brought in a CPO from eBay. eBay is kind of the original gangster of product management. Marty Kagan, if you've heard from him, is the eBay guy. Amazing school of product leaders, and several product leaders in New York City have come from that thread of product management. It's a DNA of product management that's about prioritization, measuring things, coming up with business cases before you do things. In fact, Xiaodi Zhang, who's also here, who's the CPO of First Dibs, is from that amazing product school. Chris Molliwatt, sorry, yay First Dibs. Chris Molliwatt, who is the former CPO from Warby Parker, Christophe Fernet over at Vimeo. Lots of folks are from this ex-eBay school, and they have a wonderful approach to product management. Then I went to Chegg. How many of you guys have heard of Chegg? So, some of you. Chegg started textbook rentals through an online service, and then we moved into digital textbooks. My head of product when I went there was the former head of product from Netflix. Netflix is also awesome at understanding their users in a different way. Instead of deep analytical models, they do a lot of qualitative in-person user research. And I was lucky to learn from him how Netflix studies users to decide what to build. Lastly, when I went to a company called Udacity, how many of you guys have heard of Udacity? All right, good, good, good. Online learning company. I was fortunate to run product. My CEO and my head of engineering were both from Google. In Google, historically, the product manager was the note taker and didn't have as much of a seat at the table as the engineer. And I had to learn how to work really well with engineers so that I could drive a great product strategy forward and not have the engineers want to just sort of kick it up to the side and work whatever they wanted to work on. And through that, we came together an approach of how to really get to know your users that influences your company to make the right decisions, to have confidence around understanding your user, such that every micro decision in the company is user-centric, and so that you build products that count. So I love being here today. Today I'm going to walk you through the framework that is the combination of those three strains of DNA. We don't have that much time, so I'm going to walk you through what it is and kind of how to use it, and the steps of how to learn it. So if that's all that I can leave with you, is that there's this thing called user science. It's how to get to know your users and how to share that with your company. Here's how to learn it. That would be a fantastic thing. Those are my goals. So to start with, I am with XO Group. As I mentioned, we are known as the knot, the bump, the nest, but we're primarily the knot. We help about 80% of American couples get married every year. We do everything on their wedding planning journey, from content and inspiration to project management tools, to finding and managing their vendors, to messaging their guests. We're lucky. We have great scale. We have the leading app, the leading wedding website provider, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you, Rob. Which is an awesome opportunity and a scary responsibility. When you are getting married, at that point in your life, there's nothing more important. That wedding day, who here is married? So about half. And who here is engaged? Congratulations, guys. To each other? No. Oh, you never know. When you're planning your wedding, it is at that moment the most expensive, most time-consuming thing you've ever done, where the stakes are so darn high. Because it's that one time in your life where everyone you love is together in the same place. We have a product that has multiple use cases, because we've got content, project management, marketplace, communication. It is emotional. When people come to our products, like, they expect us to recognize that there are highs and there are lows. It is multi-platform. It is always on their mind. We got to get it right. So here's how we do it. And sorry, what we do matters. I always like to start this when I talk to my product managers, because when you're touching users, it's your responsibility to make that journey that I just described a wonderful one. To start with, what is user science? These words that maybe you've never heard before. In my head, it's the combination of everything it takes to understand your users, which is a combination of their intent, their desire, what they say they want, and what they actually do, their behavior. We have different tools to measure these things, but we often don't look at the whole picture. In your teams, it is often the case that product managers will look at A/B tests and Google Analytics and Mixpanel, and your product designers will do usability tests and qualitative interviews, and they sort of share that information, but not entirely quite, and they don't put the package together. When you put that package together, it is a superpower of understanding your users and building the right stuff for them. I'll give some examples later of how I've been able to create a unicorn and solve some really hard, hairy problems using this. So it's the user needs and user behaviors. For those of you who here are structured thinkers, you can make it a 2x2. So any of you with an MBA or et cetera, or in consulting, this should look familiar. Now, let's start with understanding that user needs are different than their behaviors. So what they say they want and what they do. So for example, who here wants to live with a very healthy lifestyle, eating well, not drinking that much, sleeping a lot, right? I certainly do, right? And then who here actually does it? It's hard. And when you're in that moment, I know rationally I shouldn't eat that extra cookie. But when somebody puts a Levain cookie in front of me, damn it, I'm going to eat it. It is really hard to understand those, to always bridge our intent and our behavior. But there are some ways to do so. Let's start with the landscape. What are the tools that you can use to really understand your users? So I'm just going to throw it out there. What are some tools that you guys use to understand your users? Google Analytics. Analytics, looking at their tracking. Who here uses Google Analytics? Most of you. That's awesome. Where do you think Google Analytics would fit in this 2x2? That's right. Bottom right. A+. You can see why someone agreed to get engaged to you. Anything else? What else do you guys use to understand your users? What do you use, Celia?
I'm trying to find the name of the program that basically sort of captures moments where your users use your site.
Right.
It sort of captures interaction.
Is it look back, perhaps?
No. It's a session.
A playback tool. So you can catch your users on your site. And look back is a tool like that. You can also have users go through your site and watch them if you use user testing. So where do you guys think watching users go through your site fits on this 2x2? That's right, top right. Because it's what they actually do, but you're watching them in small batches. I'm just going to speed it forward a little bit. But we have all these tools at our disposal. Who here does one-on-one interviews? So, small number of you. That's in the top left. And then you can augment that with focus groups, which is when you do something similar, but you get 5 people in a room with a trained facilitator. Do you guys think of anything from the bottom left? How can you get inside the intention and desire of people at scale? Surveys. That's right. Surveys, if you do it in the right way without bias, you can ask people what they want and they'll tell you. Anything else?
A/B testing and Mixpanel.
I'd say A/B testing and Mixpanel tend to be more about behavior than about their intention, but that's on your bottom right. One more thing that is a really easy tool for you guys to use on the bottom left is SEO. If you go to Google and you start typing ahead, like, what should I eat? You can start seeing what other people said they wanted to do, because Google's autocomplete will give you sort of the wisdom of the crowds, as it were. So you could fill this out. You have all these different tools here. It's important to know the tools, to know when to use them, to know how to use them well. But this is a critical starting point. So a lot of people don't know all these tools. So on the top left, we've talked about interviews and focus groups. On the bottom left, surveys and SEO that really get inside users' head. The right side, usability testing with something like usertesting.com. Bottom right, analytics and A/B tests. And then there are these funny things in the middle. Customer support data, when it becomes qualitative, when you're actually getting quotes and this is what people said today, tends to be on the qualitative nature, and you get the color to it. Sometimes it's about, hey, we wish we had this feature, and sometimes it's, hey, your damn site's broken, fix it. So that you get that kind of stuff. Beta testing groups are small groups of folks that you can follow, ask them at the beginning what they want to do, see how they use it, and then and watch their actual behavior. And my personal favorite is the diary study. Has anyone here done a diary study before or heard of a diary study? My man. Diary studies to me are the most valuable user science tool that you could use. I'm going to say that on the record here. It's the most powerful tool that you can use. A diary study is you tracking users taking actions over an extended period of time. For example, on the Knot, people get engaged. Typically, somewhere between 12 and 14 months later, they get married. We would recruit people, 10, 20 people, and every 2 weeks check in with them and said, hey, how's the wedding planning going? What are your biggest challenges this week? What things have you done this week? Have you decided to take any actions? Did you find any tools? And you watch that behavior and intent and action change over time, and you find the trigger. What caused someone to say, I'm in inspiration mode to now actually want to buy? You can't figure that out from a general survey. You can't figure that out from an exit survey or an entry survey. You have to discover it in the user's journey. And typically, you unlock a tremendous amount of insights when you go through a diary study. One quick example. When I was at Udacity, Udacity offers online courses in advanced technical topics, co-taught with companies like Google and Facebook, and et cetera. People would start a class. They would pay us $100, something like that. And they would say, I'm going to take this class. We would say 5 to 10 hours a week for 10 weeks, and we'll give you a certificate. People start this. They're like, yes, I really want that. I'm going to learn this knowledge. It's going to be great for my career. First week, they're really into it. Second week starts to fade a little bit. Third week, they're not making the time. Fourth week, they stop using it. When I ask what they want when they start on this journey, they would say, I want to improve my skills. I want to look better for my career. When they leave, they say, it's too expensive. And how is you as a product manager or product designer supposed to figure out what to do when they're leaving and they're saying it's too expensive? First thing one might do, what would be a very quick response if someone says a product's too expensive? Yeah, change the price. You might change the price. In this situation, though, if that's all you did, you change the price, and you might get more people to sign up with price elasticity, but you wouldn't actually change how many people stay, because it's not the problem. So if it's not the price, well, you ask people, why is it too expensive? They're going to tell you, well, gosh, it wasn't worth the time. I wasn't able to put the time into learning. So the next thing that you might think is, well, gosh, should we make it easier to use? Should we make it shorter to use? Should we change the product dynamics? And so you could imagine spending months trying to improve your funnels, improve the usability, and at the end of that, it still doesn't matter, because that's not the problem. The problem ends up being they thought it would be really valuable for them. Learning is really hard, and they didn't have the motivation to stick with their valuable time being used on this. I had a Google CEO at the time. He's like, screw your user science thing. Just change the price. Reduce the number of steps in the funnel, and it's going to solve all our problems. And I was like, wait, this is complex. This is a new product that people haven't used yet. Let's really understand it. We did the diary study. What we found out is learning is hard, and you need a real incentive and support to get through it. We went back to our partners like Google and Facebook and said, will you give someone job opportunities if they finish this? And they said yes. We changed our product. We said, if you finish this, Google will consider interviewing you. And AT&T will interview you, and Facebook will consider interviewing you. When we just made that statement, every metric doubled. Every single metric. Onboarding, acquisition, onboarding, retention, engagement. The multiplicative of that took a company that was idling along to go like this. Because we found out what our users really needed to succeed. We were able to connect their needs on the left side with coming up with the incentive to drive their behaviors. And it's worked really well. The company is thriving. We couldn't have figured that out without user science. And so that's the power, the superpower you guys have in your roles to be able to really get the user and then figure out what it would take for them to stick through it. Here's just an example of how you might use this type of thing. Say you have an innovation that you want to launch, something totally new and crazy. You might start in the top left, interview a few people. Say you're coming up with the ultimate wedding planner. Go talk to 20 people planning their weddings and say, what's the hardest damn thing about planning your wedding? What was the most unsolved problem for you planning your wedding? You might come up with some ideas. You start there, and then you want to validate it. So you go from interviews to surveys. And now ask 1,000 people, what was hard, what is hard? They're going to disprove a few things you learned. They're going to add some more things. And you kind of shake this through and iterate that until you come up with the core of a real problem that users have that you think you can actually solve. That's what you need as a foundation of an innovative product, is actually solving a user need. But then how do you actually make sure that it works? This is where, in today's practice, you'd build a prototype. You'd say, gosh, how do I really solve this problem? Talk to people, have them test some prototypes. This is the GV book on Sprint talks all about how to rapidly build a prototype. Get it in front of users and see, did you aim yourself in the right direction to build to get the behavior that solves the problem on the left side? Sometimes it works. It's fantastic, and then you scale and iterate. Sometimes it doesn't work, and you have to go back to the drawing board. But the perfect path is figuring out the user need, then getting it in qualitative in people's hands, and then finally scaling it. When you're on the left side of this graph, anything is possible. You can solve any problem for your users. When you get to the right side, you are going to be locally optimizing. So A/B testing tells you what to do when you can change the product that you have today. But what if the product you have today is the wrong product? You eke your way to something slightly better, but you're going to miss solving the core problem for your user. At Udacity, if we had A/B tested our way on pricing or on feature usability, we probably could have gotten our numbers up 10%, 20%, but we would have missed solving the real problem for our users, and it would not have saved the company, as it were. Raphael.
Raphael, how do you keep the organization at large intellectually honest and not backing up into kind of this reductive thinking?
That's a great question. How do you get the organization to buy into this type of stuff and use it for good and not evil? This is a superpower, and with great power comes great responsibility. If you get people to buy in that you understand your users and you can craft products that meet their needs and are going to solve business problems and user problems, and people buy into that, then if you can bias any of these tests. You can interview people in a biased way that leads them. You can create surveys that have the wrong metrics and scales that biases them. You can build products that lead people in certain directions. So you got to make sure that when you execute the stuff, you execute it without bias. Which leads me to, I'll come back to this. There are these 4 learning curves if you want to get the guts of this. One is just, what are these things? When I showed up at XO Group a couple of years ago, I inherited about 25 product managers. And some of the product managers knew A/B testing, or most of them knew A/B testing. Very few of them had run their own survey. And those that did ran it. Some of them did it well, some of them didn't do it well. Very few of them had gone to interview a user one-on-one. They assumed that their designer would do that, and the designers didn't have enough time to do that, so it didn't happen. So just knowing what these are and when you should use them, well, we'll get to that, but just knowing what they are is an important point. Then you got to figure out how to do them without bias. The first time I ran A/B tests, and I did surveys, and I did interviews, I totally botched them up. I led my interviewees, I had the wrong axes. The stuff actually matters. Is it 1 to 5 or 1 to 7 or 1 to 10? Depends on the problem that you're solving. So having someone who knows this stuff or learning it yourself. So it's okay not to get it right when you start, as long as you are able to learn over time how to do this the right way. It takes practice to get the stuff right. Right? So now you know what they are, and you know how to execute them well. You got to figure out which one to use. Now, product managers, be honest. When you learned how to A/B test, did you start using A/B testing for everything? For understanding users for about everything? Some? Do you know a product manager who does that? It's when people discover A/B testing, it's often the case that they have this magical hammer, and then everything looks like a nail to them. Oh, I can totally A/B test this. I can change the text and the box and the words and the flow without actually really getting inside and understanding the user. And so that will leave you with a local optimization that doesn't always help you solve the problem the right way. So you got to learn when to use this. And then the last part is value, ambitiousness. Are you running tests that matter? Remember when I was at Chegg and I was responsible for e-commerce, I would do a price test of a product plus or minus 5% and 10%. And then I'd use that insight to adjust my product prices. Because we made low margins on textbooks. I'd never I'd never dropped the price 20% because I'd lose money. And I'd never increased the price by 20% or 30% because there are alternatives out there. Until my CPO at the time, the Netflix guy, said, "You're not learning enough. You can run tests where you would never actually implement the answer. But for the purpose of being provocative and learning, you really want to be able to stretch those tests." I've been in this situation where I've tested new home pages, and I've changed the color, I've moved the box around, I've used different language, and it's like plus or minus 1%, 2%. Sometimes when users get to your homepage, they know what they want to do. So if you really want to change their behavior, you need radically different experiences to be able to push the boundaries. And they might be wrong, but you're going to discover in it these aha moments of what's going on inside your user's head and what triggers them to behave certain ways. You're not going to go crazy every single time. You're not going to be totally provocative at every single test, but I encourage you to do it regularly because it really pushes your learning. Those are the 4 steps of learning user science, and it takes practice. But once you have it, then you're able to unlock real user understanding and value for your company. No one else in your company but you can do this. If you have a dedicated UX researcher, they're typically not spending time in the analytics and the A/B testing. Certainly your business manager, your business ops people might learn how to use analytics, but they're not interviewing the users. Somewhere between product managers and product designers, you have all these tools at your disposal, and then it's up to you to figure out how to use them. I'm describing an ideal state, that you can go from nothing to using all the stuff. It takes time to implement these things at your company, so you may not be able to use all these darn things at once. But knowing where you're going and the starting point, as you start providing value inside your organization, helping the company either make good decisions or avoid making bad decisions, you build credibility. You take videos of what people are doing. There's nothing as visceral as a video. And you start sharing this with people, and then people start to understand the value of user testing. How many folks here have used usertesting.com? So about half of you. What's wonderful about that is you can see the user using your product, and you can hear them say, you give them a task, and they trip over the thing. And you're thinking, it's so darn obvious. Why aren't you just pressing that button? And they don't see it. They can't hear you. Looks like I'm done. Your engineering team may have the same instincts as you. How do you get them to believe that you have an issue with your product? Your CEO, who may have very strong visionary thoughts about where to go, she may not believe you if you say, well, the qualitative research said this. But as soon as you put a video of a user tripping over her product, she is going to say, oh, we got to fix it for that person. So there are ways of bringing empathy into your company for these things. People sometimes ask me, what products do I use? We're a company, 300-person engineering org, 800 total people. These are the tools that we use. Sometimes bigger companies use different types of products. Happy to chat about the tools that we use and why. For early stage, mid-stage companies, many of these have become the standard toolkit. Sketch and Envision to actually build your prototypes, user testing to get validation, Optimizely, Mixpanel, and Google Analytics, and often SurveyMonkey. That's kind of the industry standard for companies of that size. So that's kind of the gist of it. With the superpower, you can really understand your users. You can share that learning with your company. You can understand what's the real problem to solve for them, and then how can you best in your company actually solve that problem. And that's how you build products that count. So I know I'm at time. You did good. Thank you very much. Great. Real quick, I blog about some of this stuff in case it's helpful to you. So it's medium.com/Tworetzky. I have an article about user science if you want to go deeper on any of these topics. But otherwise, what do we do? Q&A now?
Yeah, we have time for questions.
Time for questions. Any questions?
I was just wondering, you've talked a little bit about examples, but I was just wondering, I'm especially curious about at XO Groups, if you had any examples where your user needs or what they told you they needed was really, really different from what it turned out they actually wanted. And if you could share some of these stories, because it's always interesting.
Oh, sure. Today, for heterosexual couples, the project manager, 95% of the time, is the female partner. So in most couples, in most heteronormative couples, the female is the partner who's doing all the project management and doing most of the work. So when they started the journey, she's for some reason she feels often compelled to start the planning, and she's like, I'm gonna give work to my partner to be, and he's gonna do some of it. For whatever cultural reasons that there might be, the female partner tends to be more anxious and more excited to work on wedding planning. And so she starts by saying, gosh, I want to involve him. And he's not as excited to do the project management. And so then she ends up doing a lot of it. And so initially, she's like, I want to share everything with my partner. I want to make everything really collaborative. And then if we were to build collaborative tools to share my checklist, share my vendor list, they use it a lot less than you'd expect, because they just want to get it done. And they're just going to be the primary driver. That's something that was surprising. By the way, I don't particularly, I'm not advocating that the female partner is the primary driver in this. I would love it to be more egalitarian. We're working on pushing the wedding planning journey to be a little bit more balanced, but I can tell you this is a bias that users have today. Any other questions? Tavish.
Yeah. So how do you decide what type of user you're studying? So I find that that's one of the most difficult things, deciding whether you're looking at a long-term user or a new user, and whether you tailor the experience to one or the other.
It's a great question. Who's your user? Depends on the problem that you're solving. So for me, since I oversee all of the knots, I have to think about all of our users and all of our personas and stages beginning to end. Within the individual teams, they tend to be a little bit more segmented about the job to be done that user has. So making sure that you're thinking of the right user is important, and we sometimes screw it up. Typically, we'll find we have a bunch of hypotheses about the users and the products we want to build them. Which is why having those one-on-one interviews in the beginning to validate that these are the right users and they have the problem you want to solve is really good upfront investment. When I got to the knot, just a quick anecdote on this, I imagined that there were different types of brides. Imagine there was like I've been dreaming about my wedding for a very long time type of person, the do-it-yourself craftsy person, the rich person, the very community-oriented person. And then when we interviewed users and I spoke to 30 people getting married, 90% of them had 90% of the same problems. Personas actually weren't useful, even though you might expect them to be, because they all need to figure out how many people are coming, and then when can I actually get married, and find the location, find the team. Keeping track of all the stuff is really hard. Finding my wedding dress is really exhilarating and exciting. Getting everyone's addresses is a huge pain in the ass. Like tracking RSVPs is a pain in the ass. Everyone has that problem. People have different preferences, but the jobs to be done are the same. So that might be a framework to go back to, the jobs to be done framework of what problems is someone trying to solve, and then make sure that my product matches that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, roughly. I think the problem really presents itself when you have something that you want everyone to use, and the use cases are very different for your long-term users and your new users. But that's maybe not the same type of problem.
It is true that sometimes you need to build different things for, the question is what if you have different types of users? Sometimes the feature needed to acquire a user is different than the feature needed to retain the user. So that's why if you can segment what does someone need, what triggers to get them to take action, and segmenting them, it might be new users, users in their first year, and users in years 2 and beyond are your natural segments, and what jobs do they need to get done? Or it might be small business versus individual contributor versus et cetera, et cetera. Sorry.
Hi, I have a question with regards to when you draw the line of doing all of the research yourself, because it sounds like a lot, and when you employ an outside market research agency, or is all of it done in-house? My curiosity stems from my background in brand management, where you do get very involved with your market research partners, but you don't necessarily do all of it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of rely on the content experts for that, and it sounds like this can get a little bit hairy.
That's a good question. What if you don't have the time or the resources to do all this stuff? Sometimes you'll need to outsource it or use an external party. There's some of these tools that you need to be really trained to do yourself, to do them. A diary study takes a person a third of their time over the course of the study, because it's just a lot of logistical management that you don't have time for. Running a beta group, when you're getting lots of good insight from the beta group, same thing. It takes a lot of time to set up, manage, coordinate, get the feedback, push people along, et cetera. And if you don't have an internal person to do that, then you often need to get someone from the outside. The trade-off that I found is that bringing someone in to help you with this stuff requires context. And so there's an upfront investment in a person to be able to run all your interviews for you. And so sometimes it makes sense to bring in someone else if you don't have the time and you can train them. If you need to do a lot of that, you might as well hire the person. And if you don't need to do that much of it, if you can do it well, you might as well do it yourself. But knowing that you could bring bias into these things if you execute them poorly is worth at least someone looking over your shoulder when you do the work. At XO Group, all of our new PMs and designers, we encourage them to do all these, use these tools, but we have our product user researcher and our product analytics lead look over their test setup before they do their first A/B test and user test, and then look at the results with them afterwards to make sure that they're doing good practice. So there's a question over here, then I'll come back to you.
She can go ahead.
Oh, okay, Teresa.
Thank you. Thanks, Tess. So you mentioned a few times now sort of poorly designed tests or surveys or interviews. So are there any common types of biases or mistakes that you see people make when designing these things, and suggestions you have for avoiding them?
If you look up cognitive bias in a book or Wikipedia, there's a whole bunch of challenges there. So common ones I find anchoring your user. So setting their context before they get to figure out it for themselves. For example, say you're going to do a usability test of a new app. A bias test would be, come to the app, click on the button on the bottom left, and then try to check out. Whereas the appropriate way would be, get to an app, first thing is, oh, what do you think this does? Before you've biased them. And what do you think the main use cases of this experience would be? And now imagine you wanted to try to buy something and check out. Talk me through how you think you might do that, and then try to do that. People early in their career, they just want to get to the answer, and they'll lead the person, and they'll often miss some of that important context. But there's loads of biases in there. Probably the hardest thing to do is a one-on-one interview, because there's so many ways to lead a person when you're sitting there in front of them. They want to often please you. And so just managing the dynamics so like that you get their real authentic answer, and they don't think they're insulting you if they don't like something. There's a whole art to that. Tess?
Yeah, so just wanted to get your insight more about the qualitative aspect versus the quantitative aspect. Not really versus, but like how you see the relationship of those parts of the quadrants to each other, because I feel like, with quantitative, with surveys and A/B tests, like you can run them with a larger population in a small period of time, versus like with one-on-one interviews or usability testing, you can have that same small period of time, but on a smaller population, right? Because you can like run an A/B test to hundreds and millions of people, but then your A/B in 2 weeks, but then your usability testing to maybe 5 to 10 people within those same 2 weeks. So just wanted to get your insight or experience into like how you get the two to relate to each other or to support each other.
It does make sense when to use a tool. So sometimes it's the part of the process that you're in, and you have a clear sense of where your challenge is in that. A cheat sheet I use, the left side is about understanding a need and anything is possible. The right side is about iteration and improvement. The top row is the why, and the bottom row is the what. So if in your example, I've got a week to do it, I can run an A/B test, or I can look at analytics, or I can interview people. If you run that A/B test, you're going to see what they do, but you may not know what the trigger is. You look at the aggregate analytics. You don't see what they trip over. So you need to marry the what with the why to get the real insight of how to fix it. The good news, though, is while you might need, for statistical significance, thousands of users, depending on the incidence rate of the catalyst you're checking, you can actually figure out an audience's response to a prototype or a stimulus, even in one-on-ones, with as little as 4 users. Sometimes they say 5, 10 users, but if you put 4 users through your product and they all do something the same way, then you probably got it mostly right. And if they're all over the place, then et cetera, et cetera. So you can learn very quickly from a small number of users. This is something that's often missed. People don't always know this, and so they think, gosh, I'm going to have to talk to 10, 20, 30 users. And by the time they get to the 6th one, they're like, oh gosh, why did I spend all that money scheduling all these interviews today? I'm going to have to sit through another several hours of interviews, and I'm going to hear the same damn thing. Which is really nice, because you could then go back and forth between these tools. All right, Suman?
Can you share us any user needs or user behavior that was intriguing or fascinating during your product career?
Any things that are just particularly interesting?
Yeah, interesting that came across when you were doing a product development.
So many. How much time do you have? Oh gosh, I've learned that people getting married love to give you information about themselves. Typically, in a flow, you want to have the fewest steps in the funnel as possible, fewer fields of information to ask for funnel optimization. What we found is that couples want to express themselves so much in wedding planning that you can ask them thousands of questions and they'll answer them with very little drop-off. It's a little bit hyperbolic, but you can ask a lot of questions. And so it's a win-win if the user gives you 10 times as much information for you to then personalize the experience for them with using that information. If they don't drop off, so they get through, you've gotten this information and now you can use it to their benefit. That is counterintuitive to what many people expect. So that's a fun one. Now, we recently launched something called cash gifting. We call it the Newlywed Fund. As you guys who have attended weddings know, couples love cash. They prefer cash, but they feel like they need to register for things so they aren't awkwardly asking for cash. This is a dance that people historically do. And in some cultures and customs, it's very cash heavy, and in some it's not. A huge trend that's happening right now is that digital cash is growing for online registries. It used to be considered gauche to do that. Now it's becoming a little bit more well understood, and people are asking for cash on their wedding websites. It's still a sensitive topic, so when we figured out, we wanted to launch this, we knew this was an emerging trend. We're trying to figure out, how do we do this? And the first pass is like, honeymoon cash, give us money, etc. Like, what do you say? The couple wants the money, but they don't want to seem like jerks. And we discovered through interviews what to call it. We call it the Newlywed Fund. And when you sign up for it, you sign up for it at, you make up a product. You're like, we want $120 for scuba diving lessons. And when you've now connected the cash to an experience, suddenly it feels to the gift giver that they're not just giving you cash, they're giving you something that's meaningful. And that turned a product that made couples feel uncomfortable and that the gift givers felt not impersonal giving that gift. We found through these interviews, don't call it cash, call it like the fund, a newlywed fund, and attach it to objects, and it's growing really nicely. And the couples are getting the cash that they want. Anyway, lots of fun things from all these different experiences, but I'm sure this audience could also give you lots of good examples.
The question I had was about preparing to do some of this activities, specifically maybe one-on-one interviews, focus groups.
We can hear you, Mike.
Okay, great. So maybe if we could share some insight there on how to prepare to start doing some of these things, or maybe specifically some of the interviews, what kind of prep work we can do.
So is this, you've never done it in your company, or you're about to just start a new bunch of research?
We've done it, but I feel that it's almost the hardest part of it is the preparation ahead of time to get good results when you're actually in front of your clients, and that has been somewhat challenging for me personally in my career.
Mm-hmm. So just like a good product spec, it's helpful to start with what are your goals, be really clear about this is the problem that we're trying to solve, and this is how we're going to run it. The biggest problem that we have, and that I hear from my user researcher who looks at the tests from people doing this for the first time, is that they're vague about the goal of the research that they're doing. She forces them to be much more precise. What are you trying to figure out? Interview time flies by. It goes by very quickly. And then if you kind of don't have a good plan, you come and ask some general questions, meander a little bit. You let them take you somewhere. At the end of it, you've enjoyed a good chat, but you haven't advanced your insight. So the more precise that you can be, and have a plan of what you're trying to figure out, and then make sure that's not biased, will get you much better results. It can be really helpful to have another person look at your test plan to make sure that you're not biased and that it's clear. So that's a good rubric until you've built up a gut instinct about how to do this with low bias. Does that help?
Yeah.
Great. Raphael, we'll come back to you.
Okay, so I guess, I don't know if this is on. There we go. So 2 questions. One of them is, how do you go about advocating for this within the organization at large and really making sure that it's upheld in the culture over a duration of time and not just, hey, it's Q4, let's do user science first weekend, no one's doing it anymore. And then secondly, I guess, what's the mix within a product roadmap of initiatives that really need user science versus those that are just like straight execution, and like, how do you think about that as an EVP?
So first, how do you get a culture to buy into this thing? That's a great question. Because you have some cultures where people are used to going on gut. Sometimes they're all about analytics. So how do you build a rigor in it? Like any cultural problem or challenge, you need advocacy from the senior team saying that this is important. You tell people when they start the company this is important, and you make it part of goals and evaluations. That's kind of the trifecta of changing a culture. The senior team, people you bring in, and the rules of the company say that it's important, then it becomes more important. Depending on where you're starting from, you might not have any of those things. So it helps to initially enroll or enlist the executive team in buying into this, that this is important. Because if they don't care, they're going to want to rush through it. They're going to say, this is wasting time, we're delaying a launch, revenue's on the line, don't do this stuff. So that's how do you get buy-in on that. The sense is that running tests like these, if run well, should yield results. They generally do. And then saying, hey, if we rushed, we become output-oriented, and it may not work. If we take a little bit more time to do this, we become outcomes-oriented, and we get it to work. And then here are some examples of it. Now, say you're sitting in your organization, you haven't signed up for any of the software, no one's bought into anything. What's the way to get started? User testing is a really easy way to get started. You can go put down for $30 or $50 a test, have a person use your site, or your app and just say, tell me what you're thinking when you use this. And then you might say, try to do the 3 jobs that are most important. And they're going to trip, and they're going to miss things, and you're going to feel squeamish about it. And then I promise you, when you show that to other people in your team, they're like, oh my goodness, this is magic. You've brought the user to life, and gosh, we got to fix these things. There's a real visceral reaction to seeing a video of a person and seeing how they react to starting to get buy-in. Optimizely, the intro package to Optimizely is pretty simple functionality. It only it tags it on the front end and not the back end. But often you can get nice iterations out of implementing that and not paying very much for an intro, put it in a low volume area, and then say, hey, we used a system like this. We're able to get 20% plus results by moving some things around. Like there usually are some of those. So you can get some quick wins, get advocacy from above, and then start to have it come more into the culture. What was part 2 of your question?
Part 2 was, what's your product roadmap mix between science projects and just hardcore?
How do we actually use this? I usually have 1 to 2 big research projects going on at the company level. So we did a bride and groom diary study that took us 12 months, because that's the rough average engagement length. We're now almost done with a pregnant couple diary study. So and I've been at the company for 20 months, so you can add those numbers together. I've been doing diary studies since I've been there. And then I do a survey once every 4 to 5 months about my users. That's a corporate level set of understanding that guides our company strategy. And the individual teams and squads, they're expected to use this stuff when it makes sense. Say they're doing strategic planning for the year, or they want to go do a big new thing, they'll do the stuff on the left side to feel really good about the problems to solve. And then if they're actually building and launching a product, they will use the best practice, this type of flow. Doing this stuff doesn't have to take you forever. There's the book Sprint that came out last year has a 5-day plan on how to go from I have a really hard problem to I've put forth the best idea we can come up with and validated it with users and gotten a real signal in 5 days. Many people do it in a more condensed fashion. I don't advocate that because you often skip some very important steps. So the full 5 days is pretty important. But in 5 days, you can get a major aha out of this stuff. But we're doing this stuff all the time. Great. How are we doing on time? All right, last question. And then I'll be around if I can be helpful. Teresa.
So a lot of what you've spoken about is about finding sort of common behaviors or common problems within your users. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us are probably in situations right now where we're marching towards this idea of personalization and individualizing experiences. So I'm wondering if there's any sort of tension there, or if there's a way to sort of make those two things work in tandem, so that you're not, creating individualized experiences that don't solve for base problems.
I haven't found those to be at odds with one another. Personalization is a very important trend right now. Machine learning is on everyone's mind right now here and in the Bay Area. But you can still use all these tools to think about personalization. Your product experience, someone's trying to achieve something, and you interview 5 people, and what do they expect? What are things they use today? What are they trying to do? And would a one-size-fits-all thing work for them or not? And then you could fake personalization. It's not that hard to fake personalization with some prototypes, and you can get signal on the top right. If I gave you a personalized experience, would you have an emotional reaction to it? Would you have a behavioral reaction to it? Unless I'm misunderstanding your question, I think you can figure out personalization in this framework. Great. Guys, thank you so much for spending your evening with me. I hope this was helpful. It was great to chat with you. There's more, if useful, I write about this stuff. And thanks so much to Products That Count.
Thank you, Brent. Before we end our evening so that you can go back to networking, and there's still some food and drinks. I want us to do our raffle. So Shivan, I hope you guys kept your tickets. This is the fun part of the evening.
All right, so we have, this is our mascot, Sammy, by the way. And we build this for our customers. Even none of our employees get them because they're very coveted, very comfortable slippers that you can lounge around, either for yourself, for your family, your loved ones, whoever it is, it's fine. And so we just did this for fun at the first event. Everybody loved them. And so we said, hey, we should bring this back for every event. So we're going to give Sammy slippers away, and well, let's get somebody to just pick a winner. Let's see. There you go. You get to pick. All right. The winner is 379550. Who is that? Who's the lucky winner? Oh, there we go. There you go. You should tweet about it.
Absolutely. We also, I want to spend a couple of minutes. We also do this thing called shout outs. So if there's anything that you want to share, if you're hiring, looking for work, you have a product that you want to share, please come up front and share it. So for example, aside from running products that count here in New York City, I also run product at One Kings Lane. We sell home furnishings. We do design inspiration. We're an e-commerce site, and I am looking for a director of product. So if you know anybody, or if you are somebody who is looking to be a director of product at One Kings Lane, come talk to me after this, and let's chat. Anybody else who wants to share anything? All right, totally fine. Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm a trained graphic designer, but I'm looking right now to pivot my career towards user experience design. So if anyone has any advice or job opportunities, I'd love to hear it. So please chat with me after. Thanks.
Woo-hoo. That is a great example of a shout out. Brent has a shout out.
Can I give a shout out?
Yes, you can. Come on.
All right. I didn't want to pitch myself while I was
No. Totally do it. I do it. Come on.
So we love products that count and talks like this. At XO, we also put on something like this. We call it the New York Product Group. And we're having one in 2-3 weeks with the Chief Product Officer of Grubhub Seamless. It's going to be a fireside chat. We do those quarterly. And then in November, we're going to be putting on a conference called the New York Product Conference. It's going to be on a Saturday. We're announcing it next week, but it's an amazing set of speakers. Last year, Shadi was one of the keynotes. This year, we've got, it's looking like, so don't quote me, but we'll be finalizing this, but Naveen, the founder of Foursquare, is going to be one of the keynotes. Sarah, the head of product at Jet, is going to be one of the keynotes. We're going to have a panel about building products for product people with the product leaders from Trello, Envision, and user testing. We're going to have a fashion type panel with Glossier, Ringley, and a couple other folks. And we're going to have a panel from some agency folks about how to get to know your users really quickly. The theme is on users. We're going to be announcing it in about a week or so. Last year we did it. We do it for the product community. It was a lot of fun, and we're going to do it again this year. So.
Thank you. All right, guys. So thank you for coming. I just want to do a quick plug. Next month, hopefully we'll see you guys again. We're hosting Josh Aziz. He's the product lead for TransferWise, and he's going to be talking about building products with distributed teams. So I think that's going to be that's going to resonate with a lot of us who have distributed teams. So please come back. And like I said, if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, please do at productsthatcount.com. And then just some housekeeping. We do recycle at DigitalOcean. So make sure as you're eating, make sure you pay attention to the bins. They're tagged appropriately. Alrighty. Thank you so much, you guys, and thanks again for DigitalOcean for hosting us. Thank you, Brent, for coming tonight. The talk was great. Enjoy the rest of the evening, guys. Thank you.